Doctor Who has always been at its best on the silver screen. Well, unless you talk to one of those Big Finish weirdos, with our lifelong debts to Nick Briggs who rules our wallets with an iron fist. Obviously, when you think of Doctor Who on TV, you think of adventures in live action, but the show has always had an animated past, especially with the recent missing episode animations. This animated past began in the early 2000s, with webcasts such as Death Comes to Time, Real Time, Sharda, and the then official continuation of Doctor Who, Scream of the Shulker. However, with the success of Doctor Who's 2005 revival, the CBBC spin-off show Totally Doctor Who was created to accompany Series 2 and Series 3. This was a show all about behind the scenes tidbits, competitions, and interviews with the cast and crew. However, none of that is important right now. Instead, we're more interested in the recurring animated companion piece, The Infinite Quest, which was animated by Firestep, who had animated Scream of the Shulker. The Infinite Quest aired in 3-minute segments alongside episodes of Totally Doctor Who, following the adventure of the Doctor and Martha as they journey through the universe in search for the segments to the the data chips leading to the legendary ship The Infinite, which supposedly has the power to grant your heart's desire. Due to its animated nature and release schedule, it's quite obscure and a forgotten part of modern Doctor Who, but does it have something more to offer?
Are we going on a quest then?
I think the beginning of the quest is set up well. We immediately meet the villainous space pirate Balthazar, who wants to destroy Earth and turn everyone and everything into diamond. We're told a lot about him, how he built his ship by hand and easily dispatched of Earth's defences. It's a quick way to tell the viewer he's an established threat throughout the galaxy, an infamous pirate even the Doctor admires to an extent.
This is Balthazar, scourge of the galaxy, Corsair King of Triton of the 40th century, the greatest despot that ever lived.
In vintage Doctor Who style, the Doctor stops Balthazar with just a spoon that eats through the ship because it's made of a special fungus. I think it does a good job of showing the Doctor's creativity and ingenuity, saving all of Earth with a piece of kitchen cutlery. The Doctor never uses weapons, so it's very much in character for them to pull this kind of stunt when faced with a big threat.
I like to stir things up.
After leaving Balthazar to the mercy of space, the Doctor and Martha once again meet his robotic bird Core, who sets them on their quest, telling them about this mythical ship lost in the galaxy, holding great power. I really like that the Doctor doesn't want any part of this quest to begin with, again keeping within their character since they always reject power and wealth. Even though this power could potentially bring back Gallifrey and the Time Lords, the Doctor doesn't want it, showing their strict moral code, even with this promise of undoing the Time Lords' destruction. This choice is then taken away however, which is a smart move. The Doctor's hand is forced because Balthazar is already on the trail. It's a good way of setting the quest into motion, appealing to the morality of the Doctor, giving him a villain to overcome rather than making him search for the power for himself. I think this setup to the story is good, introducing the villain and the segmented storyline quickly and efficiently. Even though it was broadcast in 12 snippets and an omnibus at the end, the Infinite Quest is split into 5 narrative segments, so to speak. There are 3 data chips to collect, along with the bookends setting up the quest and ending it. It breaks the story up well, making it almost like a classic Who style story, especially because it's basically the key to time, but infinitely worse because there's no Romana I.
Well, how do you like it? Good.
I think it's a good idea, but the overall thing is shorter than classic Who stories, so they aren't able to spend a whole lot of time in each setting of the story, which lets it down. All of the locations and settings are really interesting, which makes it a huge shame that we couldn't see them fleshed out more in depth. The Doctor and Martha essentially rock up, have a chat with some people, a little bit of action happens, and then they're off to the next location. It's like an entire Doctor Who episode squeezed down into just 10 minutes, so everything feels very rushed. Obviously the budget wouldn't have made it possible, but I think the Infinite Quest would have been better served as a 5-part series, with 20-minute episodes for each part. It would have provided much more time for exploring the locations and the worlds, but as I said, it's just wishful thinking. I think the first location is one of the most interesting ones. The first data chip is on the planet Buchan, which has artificial suns and giant roaming oil rigs sucking up what little oil there is left in the galaxy. I think this is such such a great setting, very reminiscent of classic Who settings such as the Sunmakers, which is set on Pluto where artificial suns are used to allow human life to live on the planet in order to extort them for money. Buchan is similar to this, with the oil industry crippling the settlements that can't afford the extortionate prices. It's a very Douglas Adams era setting, with this prevalent social commentary. Because of this oil economy, there are bands of pirates who destroy the oil rigs and give the oil to the settlements that need it. It's perfectly fitting for the setting, creating these anti-hero characters that complement the surroundings. It also makes sense that there would be pirates, since the whole story is framed around pirates and pirate shenanigans.
Arr, arr, arr. Don't do that.
I do like the pirate aspect of the story, with pirate characters and iconography taking centre stage throughout the adventure. I mean, it's only natural to do this, since the whole thing is about a treasure map leading to a mythical pirate ship and its legendary wonders. There's an atmosphere kind of like the Disney film Treasure Planet, with these galaxy-spanning pirate legends and treasures. They do take it a bit too far at times, with some needlessly cringe pirate accents. Then there's also the fact that it's so similar to the Resurrection Casket, the book that came out just a year before as part of the new series Adventures range. That story was all about space pirates on a journey to find a mythical pirate ship and its legendary treasure that allows people to live forever, with the villain of the story tricking our protagonists all along, using them in order to get to the treasure. Sound familiar? Sure, there are differences, but the parallels make it so that the Infinite Quest lacks the originality it needs to stand out, since pretty much everything it does has been done before, so it could have pushed the envelope just a bit more. However, the pirate aspect is a very suitable through line, and gives us some creative aesthetics and designs, with steampunk ships and characters. It keeps the story and the setting consistent, and leads to some nice contrasts, like nature battling against machine, which is the driving force behind the second location of the quest. After collecting the second data chip from the pirate Calico, the Doctor and Martha arrive on the planet Mir, which is the setting of a war between humans and the insectoid race of mantisphids. I think this segment of the story works the best with the limited time it's given, since we get a good exploration of its themes in such a short span of time. Initially, we're led to believe that the humans are the ones invading in their giant mechanical bug-like warships, but then it turns out that the humans were driven from this planet by the invading mantisphids. Once again, it's nothing original, essentially a reversal of the Silurians, but I like this subversion. Doctor Who portrays humans as an invading, evil presence so often, so it's no surprise that this is what we believe to be happening at first, with the Doctor immediately buying into the Mantisphids Queen's story of being the victim of invasion. Despite the Doctor's love of humanity, they're always very quick to believe humans are at fault, so I like that this isn't the case here. The humans are simply trying to protect their settlements, which are already at risk enough because of the oil crisis. I also like the character of Murgrass, the lizard frog-like gun runner who has the third data chip. He's selling guns to the Mantisphids, but not out of some moral compass like Calico. Calico was obsessed with destroying the oil companies and anyone who associated with them, but Murgrass is just doing what makes him money. He has no stakes in the war, he's just there because there is a war and it gets him money. It speaks to how people profit off of war, feigning some kind of allegiance just so that they can sell weapons and get paid for it. He's not some military strategist helping the Mantisphids as he claims. He couldn't care less about who wins, as long as he gets paid. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it makes him more morally grey than Calico, who was doing what she does for a good cause. It's very anti-war, showing how people like Murgrass swoop in to make money off of conflicts, only to make them more aggressive and prolong them, since it perpetuates a constant arms race and cycle of retaliation, at the end of the day always lining pockets of someone. This, combined with the commentary of invasion, serves as a good exploration of the setting in such a short window of time, but once again the limited time constricts the story a lot and doesn't give it enough time to breathe, so the story and the themes are just raced through in order to get on with the adventure. It's a real shame, because this is such a good setting with great commentary. The next setting isn't even done well enough to warrant it being there, so these previous two could have been given a lot more time.
But we've got what we came for, Martha. Let's see where we're going next.
The final dataship is located on the prison planet Volagnoc, where villain Balthazar was once imprisoned on. This segment of the story just fell flat for me. There is a good moment, however, when the Doctor and Martha are entering the prison and the Doctor gets a big list of charges against him, with the sentence being 2 billion years. I think it's an impressive way of showing the character's old age and disregard for rules, always breaking rules and laws during adventures. It only makes sense for the Doctor to have become a wanted criminal during all of that time. It's also interesting because the episode establishes that this is part of his guilt. The charges came out of his own conscience, showing that he knows exactly what he's done, including the destruction of multiple planets. But this is probably the only interesting part of this segment. Whilst I always enjoy a classic prison planet, nothing is really done with it here. Instead, it turns out that Gurney, a prisoner, has locked up the governor and taken over the prison, pretending to be the governor rather than just, you know, leaving. It makes no sense. The Doctor then frees the actual governor, who decides to just kill every prisoner, but the Doctor stops him. It's such a pointlessly short part of the story that adds absolutely nothing. There's no atmosphere, no smart commentary or efficient use of the setting. It contributes absolutely nothing. I suppose you could say it tries to say something about the rehabilitation argument regarding prisons, but it just doesn't really do anything in this department. It's definitely the weakest part of the entire story, just feeling like it's there to fill for time. It does bring the plot threads together by revealing that all of the people with the data chips were prisoners on Volagnoc alongside Balthazar, explaining the common link between everyone and why the quest took the path it did. All throughout the adventure, the holders of the dataships have been dispatched off screen, allowing for the Doctor and Martha to collect the chips without needing to take them by force. It's an all too convenient way to avoid having the Doctor deal with them directly, but I do like that it's worked into the story, with Balthazar tracking them along each time and making it more convenient for them to progress. He steals the TARDIS to go to the Infinite, ditching the Doctor in the snow to die. To an extent, I like this, taking the Doctor out of the story and making the situation more dire, giving Balthazar a good reason to be on top going into the final act. But I think the finale to the story falls short and wraps up too quickly. Martha explores the ship and finds an image of the Doctor ready to bonk her, which is her heart's desire, showing that the Infinite wasn't a myth after all. It really did have that power. But then the real Doctor shows up on the back of the giant metal bird used to trace him and Martha throughout. He's barely out of the story for any significant amount of time, so it really makes you wonder why they bothered. I love that the power of the Infinite turns out to be a mere echo of whatever lived there all that time ago. The world building regarding the Infinite is great, since it comes from the Dark Times, one of my favourite periods of time in the Doctor Who universe, because it's so shrouded in mystery. It's implied that the Infinite's power comes from a great old one, which kind of makes you want that to have been the story rather than what we got, since it sounds so much more interesting than the lack of, well, anything. As I mentioned, the ending really falls flat because so little happens when they actually get to the Infinite. I know that's the point, since it shows how myths have a kernel of truth but never live up to the hype. But even though it's the point, it doesn't mean it's worth sacrificing any kind of threat. Balthazar finds his heart's desire, which is piles and piles of gold, but it turns out to just be a hologram, as the Doctor and Martha escape, the ship being destroyed, and Balthazar ends up back in jail, swearing eternal vengeance once again, just like a villain in a Saturday morning cartoon. But that's it. It just feels empty. It's always hard to pay off a grand, globe-trotting journey like this, but I just feel like they could have done a little bit more to make the journey feel worth it. Instead, it feels shallow and rushed. Once again, an extended runtime would have helped this, or cutting one of the segments to expand the others.
It's been 3 years, you know.
3 years?
Well, 2 3/4. We gained a bit of that by flying past light speed, of course.
Obviously, the biggest feature of this story is that it's animated. You might not have noticed that, so I thought I'd let you know so I can talk more about it in depth. When you consider the context of the Infinite Quest, the animation is actually very impressive. It was made as a companion piece for segments of a random CBBC spin-off show, but it's animated pretty smoothly and well, since it probably had a very low budget. It kind of makes me wonder where the budget is allocated for missing episode animations, since some of those look worse than Infinite Quest and they should logically have a bigger budget. Admittedly, the Doctor and Martha don't look that great, especially because they're the main characters, so the focus should have been on them. However, there are some really impressive set pieces benefiting from the animation medium, allowing more scope and creativity. You don't have to worry about the limitations of live action, so the settings are realised very well, and the action is amped up in a way that only animation can allow. Despite it being a complete shift in medium, it still fits in with Series 3, feeling just like a Doctor Who story in animated form, which I know is to be expected, but an experiment like this could have become a complete disaster, yet it succeeds well. Even though it's a bit stiff at times, the performances and the writing are consistent with the parent show, probably helped by David Tennant and Anthony Head's familiarity with Big Finish audio plays, so their acting translates well to a voiceover format. Because of its animated nature and release schedule, The Infinite Quest is not officially considered as part of Series 3, instead laying forgotten and tucked away as an obscure piece of Doctor Who history. Despite this, I think it deserves a lot more attention, if not because it simply exists in the first place. There's not many original or creative ideas within the story, but it still feels fresh because of the medium, which allows the settings to be realised in a way the main show never could. The world building is solid, creating a very good atmosphere in a galaxy that's lived in, with mining ravaged planets and inhospitable prison worlds. It's all fleshed out well, and allows some of the themes and socio-political commentary to be explored effectively. The reused concepts sometimes detract from it, but there is a nice sense of uniqueness that make up for it. Wait, what's that I hear on the Series 3 tier list? Oh my, could it be? It's a new challenger. Just for the hell of it, I think I'll give the Infinite Quest a C on the Series 3 tier list. It genuinely does hold up to the rest of Series 3, since it's exactly what you'd expect from a Doctor Who episode. Balthazar is a perfectly suitable villain, albeit quite unremarkable, reminiscent of those typical cackling Saturday morning cartoon villains. I think his robot bird core is much more nuanced and interesting, with a nice character journey and an emotional death, giving him a sense of redemption. The Infinite Quest is really let down by its pacing, which heavily hampers the story, since everything feels too short-lived and rushed. But apart from the pacing issues, it's simply a fun oddity, with great action and set pieces, good music, and the pirate theming gives it a nice through line and steampunk aesthetic, although it becomes a bit much at times. As I said, I would recommend checking out the Infinite Quest, if only because of it being a thing that exists. I think it shows the sheer versatility of Doctor Who, allowing for stories to be told across all possible mediums. It may not set the world aflame, nor is it revolutionary, but for a fun little animated experiment, The Infinite Quest is well worth a watch.
Curse you, Doctor!
And I'd like to give a special thank you to my gold level patrons, Steph McNever Miller and Mark Hippold Guy Taylor. Thank you a lot for your support.